Staff Sergeant Maria Santos adjusted her grip on the maintenance clipboard as she walked across the tarmac, her left leg dragging slightly with each step. The morning sun beat down on the concrete, and she could already feel the familiar ache starting to build in her hip. Behind her, she heard the snickering. "He thinks he's being quiet," Ramirez whispered to his buddy. "But look at that limp. How'd someone like that even make it through basic?" Santos kept walking, her jaw set tight. She had learned long ago that responding only made it worse. The clipboard trembled slightly in her hands, but her pace remained steady despite the pronounced hitch in her step. Before we dive into this story, drop a comment and let us know what state you're watching from. Maybe you've witnessed how quickly people judge without knowing the full story in your community. The hangar loomed ahead, filled with the familiar sounds of mechanics at work. Santos loved this part of her job, the technical precision required to keep these machines running. Her limp disappeared into background noise when she focused on the complex systems that demanded her attention. Sergeant Martinez looked up from an engine compartment as she approached. "Morning, Santos. Got that hydraulic report ready." She handed over the paperwork, noting how his eyes briefly flicked to her leg before returning to her face. Even the respectful ones couldn't help but notice. It had been 3 years since the injury, but the curiosity never faded from people's expressions. That evening, Maria returned to the communications array under the pretense of final adjustments. The desert air had cooled, and the base settled into its nighttime rhythm of reduced activity and heightened alertness. She climbed the tower again, this time carrying a small digital recorder hidden in her toolkit. The strange frequency returned within minutes, clearer now in the reduced electromagnetic interference of evening operations. Maria listened intently, her trained ear picking apart the layered conversations. 3 distinct voices, possibly 4, speaking in what she now recognized as Pashto mixed with Arabic phrases. She began to catch familiar military terminology embedded in the foreign words. Grid coordinates, time references, equipment designations. The pattern was unmistakable to anyone who understood battlefield communications, but Maria knew her superiors would demand proof beyond her word. The digital recorder captured everything as she worked to isolate the signal through careful antenna positioning. Hours passed as she documented transmission times, frequency variations, and the recurring vocal patterns that suggested a command structure. Each intercept revealed more operational details that made her increasingly certain this was active enemy planning. When Rodriguez found her still on the tower at midnight, his frustration boiled over. "Santos, what the hell are you doing up there? That antenna was supposed to be fixed hours ago." "Just ensuring optimal signal clarity," she replied, climbing down with her equipment and the precious recorded evidence. The hydraulics compartment was cramped and hot, forcing Santos to contort her body around pipes and electrical connections. Her left leg throbbed as she braced against the aircraft frame, but she pushed through the discomfort. The system diagnostic revealed a pressure leak in the secondary line, exactly what she had suspected from the maintenance logs. 30 feet below, she could hear Davidson's crew making bets about how long it would take her to complete the job. Their voices carried clearly in the thin desert air. $5 says she calls for help within the hour, Davidson announced. 10 says she falls off that ladder. Another voice added with obvious amusement. Santos gritted her teeth and focused on the delicate work of replacing the hydraulic seal. Her hands moved with practiced precision despite the awkward angle and the burning sensation spreading down her left leg. She had learned to work through pain, to compartmentalize discomfort until the mission was complete. The wrench slipped slightly as sweat made her grip less secure. Below her, someone shouted up with mock concern. "Everything okay up there, Santos? Need us to call the medics preemptively?" She steadied herself and continued working. The replacement seal slid into place with a satisfying click. Santos began the process of testing the system pressure, watching the gauges climb steadily toward normal operating parameters. A shadow fell across her work area. Captain Williams had approached the aircraft and was observing her progress with crossed arms. His expression was unreadable, but Santos could feel his scrutiny like physical weight. "How's it coming, Santos?" he called up. "Almost finished, sir. Just running final pressure tests." The gauges showed green across the board. Santos began gathering her tools, preparing for the careful descent that always drew the most unwelcome attention from the watching crowd below. The descent proved more challenging than the climb. Santos's left leg had stiffened during the hour of cramped work, and each rung down the ladder sent sharp jolts through her hip. She moved carefully, testing each step before committing her full weight. "Watch out below," Davidson called out in an exaggerated warning tone. "Incoming wounded warrior." Santos reached the ground and immediately began packing her tools, ignoring the snickers from the gathered mechanics. The hydraulic system was fully operational, and she had completed the job in standard time despite the difficult working conditions. Captain Williams approached her toolkit. "Good work on the pressure diagnostic, Santos. Systems running clean." "Thank you, sir," Santos replied, surprised by the acknowledgement. However, Williams continued, his voice dropping lower, so only she could hear, "I'm getting reports that your physical limitations are affecting team morale. Some of the men are concerned about safety when you're working on elevated systems." Santos felt her stomach tighten. "Sir, my work performance has never been compromised. I complete all assignments within specification and on schedule." Williams nodded slowly. "I'm not questioning your technical skills, Santos, but perception matters in a unit. When people start worrying about their teammates' physical capabilities, it affects mission readiness." Behind Williams, Santos could see Davidson and his crew pretending to work while obviously listening to the conversation. Their expressions showed satisfaction, as if they had orchestrated this moment. "I understand, sir," Santos said quietly. "I'm reassigning you to ground-level maintenance only. No more ladder work, no more elevated repairs. You'll focus on systems that can be serviced from floor level." The reassignment felt like a public demotion, and Santos knew everyone within earshot had heard Williams's words. Her jaw clenched involuntarily, but she maintained military composure. The ground-level assignments felt like punishment disguised as accommodation. Santos found herself relegated to basic inspections and component cleaning, while her peers handled the complex repairs she had once specialized in. The work was mind-numbing, designed for junior mechanics rather than someone with her expertise. During the lunch break, she sat alone at a corner table in the mess hall, picking at her meal without appetite. The familiar ache in her leg had settled into a constant throb, but the emotional weight felt heavier than any physical discomfort. Davidson's voice carried across the room as he regaled his table with exaggerated stories about her ladder work. "And then she's gripping that wrench like her life depends on it, moving slower than my grandmother." Laughter erupted from his table, and several other conversations paused as heads turned towards Santos. She kept her eyes fixed on her tray, refusing to give them the satisfaction of seeing her reaction. Master Sergeant Coleman entered the mess hall and surveyed the room before approaching Santos's table. "May I sit down, Santos?" "Of course, Master Sergeant," she replied, straightening slightly in her chair. Coleman was a respected veteran with 22 years of service. His weathered face showed concern as he settled into the opposite seat. "I heard about your reassignment. Want to tell me what's really going on here?" Santos hesitated. The temptation to confide in someone of Coleman's stature was strong, but years of keeping her story private had become second nature. "Just adapting to my current capabilities, Master Sergeant." Coleman's eyes narrowed slightly. "Santos, I've reviewed your service record. Your technical scores are among the highest in this unit. Your injury doesn't affect your hands or your brain, so why are you being treated like damaged goods?" The direct question hung in the air between them. Santos felt something crack inside her chest, a small fissure in the wall she had built around her past. Coleman leaned forward slightly, his voice dropping to ensure privacy. "Santos, I've been in this military long enough to recognize when good soldiers are being railroaded. What happened to your leg didn't happen in some training accident, did it?" Santos felt her carefully constructed composure wavering. The Master Sergeant's direct gaze made it difficult to maintain her usual deflections. She glanced around the mess hall, noting that Davidson's table had quieted, straining to overhear their conversation. "It's complicated, Master Sergeant," she finally said. "Most things worth knowing are complicated," Coleman replied. "But I've got time." Before Santos could respond, Captain Williams appeared at their table. His expression was stern as he looked between Coleman and Santos. "Master Sergeant, if I could have a word with Santos privately." Coleman stood slowly, his movements deliberate. "Of course, sir." "Santos, think about what we discussed." As Coleman walked away, Williams took a seat. "Santos, I heard you've been discussing your situation with senior NCOs. I want to remind you that spreading dissatisfaction about command decisions reflects poorly on unit cohesion." Santos felt a familiar anger rising in her chest, but she kept her voice level. "I wasn't spreading dissatisfaction, sir. Master Sergeant Coleman was simply asking about my work assignments." Williams studied her face carefully. "Santos, you seem to have difficulty accepting your current role. Maybe you'd be happier with a transfer to a different unit, somewhere that specializes in accommodating soldiers with your particular limitations." The threat was barely veiled. Santos realized that Williams wasn't just trying to minimize her role within the unit. He was actively working to remove her entirely. The injustice of it burned in her throat, but years of military discipline held her tongue. "I'm committed to serving where I'm needed, sir," she said through clenched teeth. The afternoon brought news that sent ripples through the maintenance unit. General Harrison would be conducting a surprise inspection the following morning, evaluating readiness and personnel performance. Santos watched as the announcement transformed the relaxed atmosphere into controlled chaos. Davidson rushed past her workstation, his earlier smugness replaced by nervous energy. "Santos, you better make sure those ground-level systems are spotless. Can't have the general seeing substandard work from our special assignment personnel." The mockery in his voice was unmistakable, but Santos noticed something else underneath. Fear. Davidson and his crew suddenly cared very much about her work quality when it might reflect on their unit's reputation. Throughout the evening, Santos meticulously prepared every system under her responsibility. Her tools were arranged with precision, her inspection reports detailed and comprehensive. Despite her demotion, she refused to let her standards slip. As she worked late into the night, footsteps approached her station. Master Sergeant Coleman emerged from the shadows, carrying 2 cups of coffee. "Thought you might need this." "Thank you, Master Sergeant." Santos accepted the cup gratefully. Coleman surveyed her work area with approval. "Everything looks squared away, Santos. You know, General Harrison served 3 tours in Afghanistan. He appreciates soldiers who understand what real sacrifice looks like." Santos looked up sharply at Coleman's words. The Master Sergeant's expression was carefully neutral, but his comment felt deliberate, weighted with meaning she couldn't quite grasp. "Have you served with General Harrison before, Master Sergeant?" she asked cautiously. "Our paths crossed once," Coleman replied. "Helmand Province, 2019. Nasty situation with insurgents targeting a forward operating base. The general was a colonel then, leading evacuation operations when everything went sideways." Santos felt her heart rate quicken. Coleman's timeline and location matched her own deployment exactly. She studied his weathered face, searching for recognition or connection. Santos set down her coffee cup with trembling hands. "Master Sergeant, did you say Helmand Province in 2019? Forward operating base Crimson." Coleman's eyes sharpened with recognition. "You were there." It wasn't a question. Santos felt the walls she had built around that memory beginning to crumble. The night air suddenly felt thinner, and she could almost hear the distant sound of helicopter rotors and gunfire that had haunted her dreams for years. "I was assigned to aircraft maintenance at Crimson," she said quietly. "But that night, everything changed." Coleman nodded slowly. "The night Colonel Harrison's convoy got hit. 3 vehicles destroyed, half his security detail down. The insurgents had them pinned in a kill zone with nowhere to run." Santos closed her eyes, transported back to that chaotic evening. She could smell the smoke, feel the heat from burning vehicles, hear the desperate radio calls for immediate evacuation. The memory played out with vivid clarity despite her efforts to suppress it. I remember seeing you run toward the gunfire, Coleman continued. Most people were running away from that hellscape, but you went straight into it. Took 3 of us to figure out where you'd gone. The weight of that night pressed down on Santos's shoulders like a physical burden. She had spent 3 years trying to forget, try to move forward, but Coleman's words brought everything rushing back with overwhelming intensity. Master Sergeant, I need to tell you something about that night, Santos said, her voice barely above a whisper. Coleman leaned closer. I'm listening, Santos. She took a deep breath, knowing that once she started speaking, there would be no going back to the comfortable anonymity she had maintained. The truth demanded to be told, especially with General Harrison arriving tomorrow. Colonel Harrison wasn't the only one who got hurt that night, she began. Santos stared at her hands, gathering courage for words she had never spoken aloud. Master Sergeant, when Colonel Harrison's convoy got hit, I wasn't supposed to be anywhere near the action. I was supposed to stay at the maintenance bay, keep the birds ready for emergency evacuation. Coleman remained silent, allowing her to find her own pace. But I heard the radio chatter. Santos continued. 3 vehicles down, multiple casualties, and the colonel was trapped in the lead vehicle. The insurgents had positioned themselves perfectly. Every time someone tried to reach him, they got cut down. The memory crystallized with painful clarity. Santos could see herself grabbing the emergency medical kit, checking her sidearm, and making the decision that would change everything. I knew the terrain around that sector, she said. There was a drainage ditch that ran parallel to the road, maybe 50 meters from where they were pinned. If someone could low-crawl through that ditch, they might reach the colonel without exposing themselves to direct fire. Coleman's expression grew more intent. You went alone. There wasn't time to organize a proper rescue team. The radio reports said Colonel Harrison was losing blood fast, and the insurgents were preparing to advance on his position. Someone had to move immediately. Santos paused, her breathing becoming shallow as the next part of the story approached. The part she had relived in nightmares for 3 years. I made it to within 10 meters of the colonel's vehicle before they spotted me. That's when the sniper opened up. First shot missed, second shot hit the ground next to my head. But I was close enough to see Colonel Harrison slumped against the door, barely conscious. Coleman leaned forward. What happened next, Santos? I realized the only way to reach him was to draw the sniper's fire away from his position. So I did something that probably saved his life, but cost me mine. Santos took a shuddering breath before continuing. I stood up and ran directly at the sniper's position, drawing his fire while screaming for Colonel Harrison to move toward the evacuation point. The first bullet caught me in the left hip, spun me around, but I kept running. Coleman's face had gone pale. Jesus, Santos. The pain was incredible, but I could see Harrison starting to move. That's all that mattered. I kept charging the sniper's nest, firing my sidearm, making myself the biggest target possible. The second bullet hit my left thigh, dropped me to one knee. Santos's voice grew stronger as she relived the moment that had defined her. But by then, Harrison was clear of the kill zone. Our guys were able to reach him and get him to the evacuation point. The sniper kept shooting at me, but I'd crawled behind some debris. How'd you get out? Coleman asked quietly. Took 47 minutes for the quick reaction force to suppress the sniper position and extract me. 47 minutes bleeding in the dirt, but I could hear Harrison on the radio coordinating his own rescue. His voice was strong, which meant I'd done my job. Coleman shook his head slowly. Santos, that's not just heroism. That's Medal of Honor-level sacrifice. Santos looked down at her leg. 3 surgeries, 18 months of physical therapy, and permanent nerve damage. But Harrison lived. He went on to command 2 more successful operations in theater. Every promotion he's earned since then, every life he's saved as a general officer, exists because someone was willing to take those bullets. The maintenance bay fell silent except for the distant hum of aircraft systems. Coleman stared at Santos with a mixture of awe and anger. And you've been letting these idiots mock you for 3 years, he said finally. Santos managed a bitter smile. What was I supposed to say, Master Sergeant? That my limp comes from saving a general's life. That would sound like the most pathetic attempt at stolen valor anyone's ever heard. Coleman stood abruptly, pacing toward the aircraft they had been servicing. Santos, tomorrow morning, when General Harrison arrives, you're going to be standing front and center for that inspection. No more hiding in the background. Master Sergeant, I don't think that's a good idea, Santos protested. Captain Williams has made it clear that my presence reflects poorly on unit cohesion. Williams is about to learn what real leadership looks like, Coleman replied grimly. When General Harrison sees the soldier who saved his life being treated like damaged goods, there's going to be a reckoning in this unit. Santos felt panic rising in her chest. You can't tell a Master Sergeant. I never reported what happened that night through proper channels. There's no official record of my actions. Coleman turned back to face her. Santos, why didn't you file for commendation? What you did deserves recognition, not just from Harrison, but from the entire military. The question hung heavy between them. Santos had wrestled with that decision for 3 years, always concluding that drawing attention to her actions would seem self-serving. Because it wasn't about recognition, Master Sergeant. It was about doing what needed to be done. Harrison needed to survive, so I made sure he survived. Filing paperwork about it afterward felt wrong. Coleman's expression softened. That attitude is exactly why you deserve recognition, Santos. Real heroes don't seek credit for their actions. As if summoned by their conversation, Captain Williams appeared in the maintenance bay doorway. His expression was suspicious as he observed Santos and Coleman standing together near the aircraft. Working late again, Santos, Williams called out. Hope you're not filling Master Sergeant Coleman's ears with complaints about your work assignments. Santos felt Coleman tense beside her. The Master Sergeant's jaw tightened, and she could see him preparing to confront Williams directly about the treatment she had endured. Actually, Captain, Coleman said in a dangerous tone, we were discussing tomorrow's inspection protocols. General Harrison arrived precisely at 0800 hours, his presence commanding immediate attention throughout the maintenance facility. Santos stood at attention with the rest of the unit, her heart pounding as the general's eyes swept across the assembled personnel. Williams stepped forward to begin the formal presentation, but Coleman intercepted smoothly. General Harrison, there's someone here you need to meet. Santos felt every eye in the unit turn toward her as Coleman gestured in her direction. The general's gaze settled on her face, and she watched as recognition slowly dawned in his expression. Staff Sergeant Santos, General Harrison said quietly, his voice carrying across the silent hangar. I never got the chance to properly thank you. Williams looked confused, glancing between Santos and the general. Sir, I'm not sure what you're referring to. Harrison's voice grew stronger. Captain Williams, this soldier saved my life in Afghanistan. She took 2 bullets to ensure I could reach safety. Every day I've served since then exists because of her courage. The maintenance bay erupted in shocked murmurs. Davidson's face had gone white, and Santos could see the realization hitting each of her tormentors like physical blows. Santos stepped forward slightly. General, I was just doing my job, sir. Harrison shook his head firmly. No, Santos, what you did went far beyond duty. You made a conscious choice to sacrifice yourself for someone else's survival. That defines heroism in its purest form. Williams stammered an apology, but Harrison's attention remained fixed on Santos. I've been hoping to find you for 3 years, Santos. Your actions that night earned you a Silver Star, but the paperwork got lost in the chaos of deployment rotation. Santos felt tears threatening as the general continued. As of today, you're being transferred to my personal staff with a promotion to technical sergeant. Your talents are wasted here. If this story moved you, share your thoughts about your favorite moment, or tell us about someone you know who showed quiet strength despite being misunderstood.